So in my last class, we were studying about the structure, reproduction, and significance of Spirogyra. And also we have studied about the symbiotic algae. That is, we have studied about the lichens in detail. So today, let us study about the structure, reproduction, and economic importance or the significance of Sargassum. So as you all know, this is one of an algae, which is a macro or a massive algae, which is found in marine form. And this is one of the algae which is commonly a brown algae. It is commonly called as Gulf weed. And this is one of the brown algae. And also if you see the image of this particular algae, which looks like that of a angiosperm, where you, because of the structure, because of its thallus organization, where this is one of the image which has been taken deep inside the ocean, where this is one of the species of Sargassum which has been found attached to the substratum. See here, you could see the algae which has got a shoot-like structure or the stem-like structure, leaf-like structures, and you could see some structures which are called as air bladders, or it is also called as vesicle. And also this particular sargassum, as I was mentioning, it is commonly called as Gulf weed, and it has also got a various economic importance, where, because as you all know, the brown algae, they have a cell wall content which is made up of alginic acid. This alginic acid has been extracted from this particular weed, and it has been used in various purpose. So in this particular class, we are going to study the systematic position of this particular algae, and we are going to study the distribution where you can find this particular algae, its thallus organization. We are going to study its anatomy also. Finally, we are going to study about the reproduction in this particular algae. And finally, we are going to study the economic importance of this particular algae. So as you all know, this is one of an algae which belongs to the division Phaeophyta. What are these Phaeophyta commonly called? Anybody? Yes, they are commonly called as brown algae. They are commonly called as brown algae. The distinguishing feature of this brown algae is the pigment system in them. That is, they have got a chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and fucoxanthin. It is one of an important pigment which is present in this particular algae. Another distinguishing feature of this Phaeophyta is the cell wall component. The cell wall component is made up of a polysaccharide called as alginate, or alginic acid is present on the cell wall of this brown algae. Hence, this brown algae has got various economic importance. And the mode of reproduction in this group of brown algae is oogamous. That is, they produce the oogonium as a female reproductive structure and antheridium as a male reproductive structure. And another important characteristic feature of this sargassum or this brown algae is the kind of flagellation they have. The male gamete is anthrozoids, where they have a flagella laterally produced, lateral surface of this particular gamete. You can find two flagella. One is whiplash and other one is tensile type. And most of the species of brown algae, that is under division Phaeophyta, most of them are massive in their structure. They are massive and commonly form a weed in the ocean, and of course they have got high economical values. So today's sargassum, we have, I mean, as you all know, as I was mentioning, it belongs to the division Phaeophyta, class Cyclospora, order Fucales, family Sargassaceae, and the genus and the species we are going to study is Sargassum cinereum is the species which we are going to study today. And the Sargassum, there are around 300 species which has been distributed all over the world. Till now, there are 300 species has been reported all over the world. And there are around 10 species which you could find in our Indian coastal region also. And I have listed out some of them. One of the important species is Sargassum longifolium and Sargassum myricosystem. These are the two different dominant species which you could find in our Indian Ocean, both in east as well as in our west coastal as well as in the south coast of our ocean. We can come across this particular sargassum, where the sargassum, as I was mentioning, it is one of a marine algae. That is, you can find them in ocean only, and it is popularly or commonly called as Gulf weed. Remember, you know, your Spirogyra, it is commonly called as water silk, isn't it? Likewise, sargassum is popularly called as Gulf weed. And as I had mentioned, it is being found distributed in tropical and temperate ocean. And you can find them floating like this. You can find them floating and form a massive seaweed. See, this is one of the image. See, can you see one of the image? Where it has formed this is the ocean, where you can find the free floating sargassum all over the ocean. And this is one of a massive or a major mass seaweed which is being found stretched from West Africa to Gulf of Mexico. And now it is one of the biggest seaweed in the world according to the satellite observation. When it was observed through the satellite, you could see these weeds which has been distributed from West African region towards the Gulf of Mexico. You can find this sargassum which are free floating massive brown algae. And in India, as I was mentioning, you can find them in east as well as in west and south coast. And even in Australian seas, you can find Floridian seas, West Indies, and also in Japan. So this is one of algae which is native of Japan. So here we understood that this is one of a organism or algae which is belongs to the division Phaeophyta, and you have 300 species of sargassum. It is a marine form and it forms a algal bloom in ocean, and you can find both free floating form like this. You can find some free floating form as well as some of the species of the sargassum are also found attached onto the substratum in marine condition. Then coming to its habitat, as I had mentioned, the sargassum is macroscopic structure, and it looks more or less bushy in habitat, in its habit. That is, if you observe it carefully, it looks like a angiosperm plant which are bushy in nature. So you can distinguish that particular, as I was mentioning, you can distinguish if it is a attached form, you can distinguish it as a shoot system, and this particular shoot would have been attached to the substratum with the help of attachment disc. You never find root-like structure or rhizoids, anything. They have some structure called as attachment disc. This attachment disc help in the attachment of this particular algae onto the substratum. So most of them usually they are free floating form, and some of the species, for example, Sargassum vulgare, this is Sargassum vulgare is found to be attached onto the substratum. There are some species like majority of the species they are free floating and forms without any attachment disc. And in Sargasso Sea, you can come across one more species called as Sargassum strix. So this is about the habitat. Kindly remember, this is one of a macroalgae, brown algae, and it is a marine algae. You can find, I mean, looks like a angiosperm bushy plant and has got a thallus, which looks like a stem-like structure of an angiosperm, leaf-like structure of an angiosperms, and they are free-floating, and some of them are found to be attached onto the substratum. Then coming to the thallus, so actually the thallus, or how actually this plant body of this particular algae is. So you can observe the images over here. So here, first let us describe this particular image. Here in this particular image, you can come across, this is just one, say this is a algae, that is the sargassum, the bushy-like structure, the algae, which has been elaborated or magnified. And this is one of the branch of this particular algae, which has been magnified. That in diagrammatic representation, how actually we can describe. So here this algae has got a central stem-like structure called as central axis. See here, you could see the central axis. Surrounding this central axis, you can find the lateral branches. These are the lateral branches, these leaf-like structures, whatever you can come across. These are called as lateral branches. See, these are lateral branches, which are dorsi-ventrally flat. They are dorsi-ventrally flat. That is, they are leaf-like, and they have a and also the phyllotaxy. Phyllotaxy is the arrangement of the leaf. The phyllotaxy is 2 or 4. You can, at each nodal region, you can find either 2 leaves or 4 leaves. And the leaf margin, if you see the leaf margin, we cannot call it as leaf here, leaf-like structure, or you can call it as a axillary, or you can call it as a lateral branches. So here, this leaf-like structure, they have got the midrib-like structure, and the margin of this leaf-like structure is serrate or dentate. That is, the surface of the margin is serrate or dentate, and the main function of these leaves are photosynthetic in function. And near this leaf-like structures, you can find one air bladder or vesicle-like structures you can come across. See, if we magnify this particular image, you can find some bladder-like structures. See, these are bladder-like structures. See, here it has been magnified. See, this is the central axis, and these are the lateral branches, and these are the vesicles, or you can call it as the air bladders. See, that has been magnified. I mean, it has been written in diagrammatic representation. So what are these air bladders and what are their function? So the main function of this air bladders, is floating. So, you know, there are some of the forms, if they are found attached to the substratum also, the shoot system or the leaf-like structure has to float, and it has to reach the sunlight for the process of photosynthesis. And there are many free-floating forms. For the process of flotation, they require the air bladders, that is for creating the buoyancy. So they have to float, hence they have a special structure which is made up of air-filled cells, that is spongy parenchymatous cell-like structures. They are filled with air. Because of this air bladders, the Sargassum plant can float easily. So the main function of this air bladder is what? Helps in buoyancy. That helps in the process of flotation. See, you can find in this image, it is easy to understand. You can find a main axis and the lateral branches, the leaf-like structures, whatever you could see. And near the leaf-like structure, you can find the air bladders. The main function of this air bladders is the buoyancy. There are certain species of sargassum where here the air bladder maybe, sometimes it could be get separated from that of a leaf-like structure, or the stalk-like structure of the leaf can also get modified into the air bladder-like structures. Depends upon the species of the sargassum also. And apart from this central axis and the branch, there are certain axillary branches. These are called as axillary branches. What is the meaning of axillary branches? Near the axil of the central axis and the lateral branch, whatever the place it is, that there are certain branches which arises. Those are called as axillary branches. From this axillary branches, you could find the special structures called as receptacles. These are called as receptacles in this image also. See here, you could find leaf-like structures, you can find bladders, and there are some special structures which are reproductive in function. Those are called as what? Receptacles. They are called as receptacles. The main function of this receptacles is, this is like in angiosperm, what you could find the inflorescence or the flowers, isn't it? So the main function of this flower is the process, helps in the process of reproduction. So likewise, even in this sargassum also, these receptacles, they have separate sex organs in them called as oogonium, or the male conceptacles and the female conceptacles. Here, the receptacles have got a special structures inside them. They are called as conceptacles. They are called as conceptacles. What are these conceptacles? They are like the gametangia. That is the structures which produce the gametes. They are called as gametangia. So once again, I will repeat. So here the sargassum is a massive algae, and if you see some of them are floating and some of them are found attached. The attachment is through the attachment disc. And if you see the shoot-like structures, you can find the central axis or the main branch. Surrounding the central axis, there you can find the lateral branches and the leaf-like structures. These leaf or the phyllotaxy is 2 or 4. The leaf or dorsi-ventrally flat, and they are having a mid-rib-like structure, and the margin of this leaf-like structure is serrate. And apart from this leaf-like structure, you can find some air bladders also. The main function of this air bladder is flotation. And apart from this, you have certain axillary branches. You have some axillary branches. The main function of this axillary branch is the reproduction. They carries the special structures called as, write down, it is special structures called as conceptacles. Here, the conceptacles are two kinds, maybe a male conceptacle and a female conceptacles. Male conceptacle is different from that of a female conceptacle. The same conceptacle may not carry both male and female gamete. And some species of sargassum, they are strictly dioecious. That is, male sargassum is different from that of a female sargassum. However, most of the species of sargassum, they are monoecious. That is, they have both male and female conceptacles in the same receptacles in the same plant. I think I understood. I think you people would have understood about the morphology of this particular sargassum. So now let us move on to the anatomy of this particular algae. So if you take a transverse section, of this leaf-like structure, how you could only 10 minutes left. Okay. If you take a transverse section of this particular sargassum and the leaf of the sargassum, and if you observe it under the microscope, this is how it looks. This transverse section like this, and we are observing under microscope. You could find the upper and the lower layer, but anatomically or microscopically, you cannot distinguish the upper and the lower epidermis, but however, they have been covered over by a cuticle. So why they have to cover over by a cuticle? Because they are the aquatic plants. So in order to avoid this rotting and all, the cuticle has to be there. And you have hypodermis. you have a hypodermal region. Hypodermal region. This hypodermal, see, you can see the hypodermal region. Hypodermal region is made up of elongated cells. See, these are elongated cells. The main function of this hypodermal cell is they are palisade-like cells. The main function of this hypodermal cells is the photosynthesis. And also they have got some granules inside them. These are called as fucosin granules, that is the reserved food materials which you could find in this particular cells. The main function of this elongated cells in the hypodermal region is photosynthesis as well as the storage of reserved food material in the form of fucosin granules. And you have a cortical region. The main function of this cortical region, they are slightly thick walled, and the main function is they give a mechanical support to the algae. And in the middle, you can find the medulla region, where you can find loosely arranged cells. So this is about the anatomy of the thallus of Sargassum. And also there are some certain receptacles. So if you take a transverse section of the receptacles and if you observe it under the microscope, there are certain receptacles. You know what are these receptacles? The main function of this receptacle is to have a reproductive structures. So in some of the receptacles, they are sterile. They produce certain sterile structures. See, they produce certain sterile conceptacles. If the conceptacles doesn't have either oogonium or antheridium, such conceptacles. What are conceptacles? These are the structures which are producing gametes, isn't it? Where you can find this conceptacle on the receptors. On the receptors you can come across. If there are certain conceptacles where they never produce any such gametes inside them, such conceptacles, they are called as sterile conceptacles. So this is the transverse section of a receptors. Say these are receptacles, and this is the transverse section I'm showing over here. So this is the section of the leaf-like structure. This is a section of this receptacles. So here you can, again here also you can find the epidermal region, and just beneath the epidermis you can find the hypodermal carrying elongated cells, and you can find the cortex and the medulla region. Here in this particular receptacles, you can find some flask-like structures. These are flask-like structure which has been embedded inside the thallus. They have been embedded, this flask-like structures have been embedded inside the thallus. These sterile conceptacles, they produces the sterile structure called as paraphysis. See, they produce some hair-like structures called as paraphysis. And these paraphysis arises from some of the meristematic cells. These are the meristematic cells. So if you see these are certain flask-like structures called as conceptacles. From this conceptacles, the paraphysis arises. And these paraphysis are hair-like structures, and they arises from the structure, which at the lower end, like our root hairs, where our root, the hair, where we could see the growth of our hairs because of the presence of root hair. Like that only, there are certain cells which are meristematic in nature. They help in the growth of this paraphysis. The main function of having the sterile conceptacles is they keep the receptor moist. And also they have an ability of producing certain mucilaginous structures. Because of the presence or the production of this mucilaginous structure, what happened during the unfavorable condition also, the receptacle can survive because of the mucilaginous structures which has been produced by such kind of sterile conceptacles. And also, if you take a transverse section of a main axis, and observe it under the microscope, this is how it looks. So this is how the transverse section of the stem looks. So it is made up of the outermost layer called as meristroderm. It's made up of barrel-shaped cell-like structures, and just beneath this meristroderm is the outermost layer, and just beneath the meristroderm, you can find the cortex, where you can find polygonal cells. The main function of this particular cortex is they are thick walled cells. The main function is giving the mechanical support, and there are some very thick walled cells in the central region. Again, they help in, help gives the mechanical support for this particular algae. So this is about the anatomy and the morphology of this sargassum. So we are running in short of time. Most probably I may not continue with this particular